Welcome back to another lesson in this amazing course. This is, of course, Jason Hartman, and today we are going to talk about something that it took me many years to discover. And yes, it was a discovery. It's what I call the Hartman Risk Evaluator. You know, when I think of real estate investing, I really think that at the core of it, I'm not even really a real estate investor. I'm a commodities investor. And the reason I like commodities when they're packaged or labeled as real estate is because commodities are a great hedge against inflation. And when we're talking about the type of commodities that are the ingredients of a house or an apartment building, those commodities are needed by pretty much every human being on earth, aren't they? Think about the ingredients of a house or an apartment building. What's it made of? That's what we're going to explore. Okay, what are our learning objectives for this lesson? Well, we're going to learn how to calculate something I call the LTI ratio, or the land to improvement ratio. And you've probably heard of the LTV ratio, the loan to value ratio. Well, I did sort of a takeoff on that to come up with my little trademark term here of land to improvement ratio. Because when you purchase a property, most people think of it as one singular component, but it's really two major components. One is the land, and the other is the structure, the house, the apartment building, the office building, the shopping center, the industrial building, whatever it is, sitting on that land. That's called the improvement, the LTI, the land to improvement ratio. And this is a very important thing that really nobody else is talking about. So far as I know, I am the only one that analyzes deals this way. So I think you're going to enjoy it, and it's really easy to master. Okay, so we're going to look at what makes the LTI ratio increase, what makes it decrease, why is it important. Okay. Think of the ingredients of the house, right? Or the apartment building. That's the improvement. What is it made of? It's made of lumber, it's made of glass, steel, copper wire, petroleum products, concrete. All of these things and many other things are the ingredients to a house or an apartment building or many other types of buildings as well. And those ingredients, those commodities, and we are considering ourselves packaged commodities investors or assembled commodities investors, they are very important. Why are they important? Well, number one, everybody on earth needs them. Everybody consumes them because they are the ingredients to any house or any apartment pretty much. And they are indexed to inflation. They are a great hedge against inflation because the dollars, the euros, the whatever currency you're talking about, they are simply symbols of value. They aren't intrinsically valuable. Things, on the other hand, actually have value. Things are valuable because we use things. We can consume things, and these things can improve our lives. Certainly, having a roof over our head improves our life, right? It's better than not having a roof over our head. So when we look at the LTI ratio and we split it into its component parts, let me just share an example. I use this one in many of my seminars of a $100,000 property. Now, the property technically is just the land. That would be the real estate. But sitting on the land is the improvement. In this example, let's say that the value of the improvement, the house sitting on the land, is $80,000. And the land underneath it is $20,000. And by the way, that equation holds up fairly well in many of the markets that we recommend for investors. Now, if you're looking at a property in a very expensive market, I'll give you an example of the last property I owned in California. It was a home in which I lived. It was in Orange County, California, which is south of Los Angeles. And when I bought this property, it was $815,000. And over the years, it went up in value. At the highest point, I think the value was about $1.3 million. And when when the value peaked, I think that my estimate of LTI ratio was that the improvement, the house sitting on the land, was about $200,000, maybe a little less than that, and the land was about $1.1 million. That is a rather risky investment because the land value isn't really, what do I want to say? It's not really something that holds a bunch of intrinsic significance. It's important to have land. Land is certainly a valuable commodity, but that land could go down in value or up in value, whereas the improvement can also do that, but it tends to do it at a much slower pace. The ingredients to a house do not fluctuate as dramatically as the underlying land can. So that is why we want to understand LTI, or land to improvement ratio. So in the example I gave you of the $100,000 property, which includes land and improvement, that's an 80-20 LTI ratio, right? It's 80% improvement and 20% land. So they both have value, and basically there you have the equation. Okay, land values are driven by local supply and demand. Improvement values are driven by replacement cost. And what's interesting about the improvement value is that those packaged commodities, those ingredients to the house or the apartment building that we're talking about, those can be influenced by things going on halfway around the planet. For example, when there was a lot of development in China, there still is, but when China was really, really going through this amazing growth spurt, they were hogging up all of these commodities, right? And I remember I was doing a landscaping job on one of my properties. It was a new property, and I was having a beautiful yard put in, and a patio and all of these improvements. And I remember asking my contractors that I was interviewing when I was looking for bids, I said to them, "Hey, why is it so expensive this time? I've landscaped many homes over the years." And they said, "China." And I said, "Huh?" And they said, "Well, China has driven up the cost of concrete dramatically because they're using so much of it, building roads and buildings and all of this infrastructure, that they were driving up the price of concrete." And I'm thinking, that's amazing how important the global impact of all of this is. Something going on in China is increasing the cost of me putting a yard in my backyard of my house. Never really thought of it too much before that. Land values driven by the local supply and demand picture, and a lot of it by psychology. Because when the markets are going crazy, when they're getting really frothy and prices are going up very quickly, people have this psychology that is a fear of loss psychology, a scarcity mentality, not an abundance mentality, the opposite of it, a scarcity mentality. And so they will be buying properties and paying outrageous prices that really make no sense whatsoever. And the vast majority of that equation is in the land, as I talked about on my $1.3 million property that I used to own. That can evaporate very quickly. So those markets are more risky according to the Hartman risk evaluator. So the takeaway is properties with low land values are less likely to experience major declines or fluctuations in either direction, actually. And the improvement values, they regress toward replacement cost. Now, this is another term that we talk about. It's called regression to replacement cost. That is a very important thing to understand, that you want to invest in these low land value markets because they are far less risky. And as a bonus, the cash flow is much, much better in those markets. So the key factors are increases in land values. This is what makes the LTI ratio increase, or at least the land component increase. When the price of the property increases due to higher land values, it will increase the risk factor in the LTI ratio. The decreases in improvement value in relation to that, right? When the cost of structures decreases due to deflation in these materials, these packaged commodities that we talked about, it will increase the risk factor because you have less of that intrinsic value in the commodities. But again, the improvement value does not fluctuate nearly as much as land values in expensive markets. I believe it was Will Rogers that said, invest in land, they're not making any more of it. And that sounds good as a kind of a trite phrase and a kind of a cool quip and a quote and a soundbite. But hey, I don't really like land very much. I want cheap or free land in my real estate investments and high as a proportion, as a ratio, improvement cost, okay? An LTI ratio over 0.1 is considered to be, or 1.0 is considered to be higher risk, okay? Now, the LTI ratio, like the rent to value ratio that we discussed in another lesson, is really something that is very easy to understand and calculate. The problem is, most people just don't even think of it. It doesn't even occur to them. Go to where I live. Go to La Jolla, California, or where I used to live, Newport Beach, California, or go to any expensive, I'll say it, overpriced market in the world, and you're going to find people that have no concept of LTI ratio. They never even thought of it. It never even occurs to them. They don't understand why their portfolio is so volatile, okay? So key factors here. What happens in the decrease? When the land value decreases, you see a decrease in the land value, the price of properties decrease due to lower land values overall, and that lowers the risk factor in the LTI ratio, the land to improvement ratio. But it increases relative, of course, to the improvement value. When the cost of structures increase due to inflation and material or labor costs, because labor is a big component of it too, right? If it costs a lot more to hire those workers to build that house or that apartment complex again, well, that changes. That increases your improvement value. It will decrease the risk factor, though, in the LTI ratio. An LTI ratio under 1.0 is considered to be lower risk. All right, how do we research this, you ask? Easy. Let's go back to Zillow. We're always using this, okay? I almost think we ought to be a commercial for them. No, not really. But, you can research this many ways. Now, there are 3 basic ways you can find out the improvement value versus the land value of a property. One is an insurance company, because the insurance company, and this is how I made the discovery, by the way, the insurance company does not insure the land. The land can't burn down, but the house sitting on the land can burn down. And since they're insuring the structure, the improvement, well, they got to know what it's worth, don't they? Because they may have to replace it and pay an insurance claim on it someday. So that's one way, the insurance company. Another way is an appraisal that breaks out the land value versus the improvement value. And a third way is the tax assessor, the county tax assessor for that area. None of these will be perfect, just so you know. They're all estimates, but they can really help you understand what you're buying. What is the value of each of these components? So here, for example, I'm just taking that, I think this is the same property from our prior lesson, in Indianapolis, and you just go to Zillow, you put in any city, any market you're looking for, and you pick a property, and then what we're going to do here is you click under the Contact Agent tab, but you see here where it says Other, you've got the parcel number, okay, the parcel number under the Other category. I just want you to make sure you see that on your screen. Okay, and then the county website. That is a link. So you can use that parcel number and you just copy it and paste it. And you go to the county website and use that parcel number and it will show you the split. Now, the one thing I do have to say is that this research can be a little bit difficult depending on the county, because the counties are all different and they do not use the same system. Real estate is a fragmented business. And one of the things I always say, in many ways, not just this one, is embrace the fragmentation. Because for an investor, when you understand that the fragmentation of the market is actually a good thing because it keeps the big institutional investors largely, I mean, they're in our business as well, but not in a major way. It keeps them largely out of our business. And so you don't have every other house on the block owned by some big Wall Street firm. Now, in this last Great Recession that we had, you have probably more than ever owned by big institutional investors, but still, as a percentage of the overall market, it's a very small number. So what are your action items here? Well, pretty easy. Calculate the land to improvement value ratio for 5 properties and rank them in order of least risky to most risky. Let me give you a hint on that. This is really quite easy. In fact, like the rent to value ratio, you can pretty much do this in your head. I mean, we showed you how to look it up and do the county website, but if the property cost, okay, and you can look at building cost, and we'll talk about that more as the course develops, but if the property costs an average of, say, $80 per square foot to build it, and the property is 1,500 square feet, you have 1,500 square feet by $80 per square foot, that's $120,000. That's the replacement cost of that property, of the improvement. I should actually use my own language. That's the replacement cost of the improvement. Well, if you can buy the whole thing, the land and the improvement, for $140,000, and you know just through sheer square footage numbers that it costs, and this varies by market too, but if it costs about $80 per square foot to build the house, then you know you're only paying $20,000 for the land. That would be a lower risk investment because that land to improvement ratio is good. A higher risk investment would be where you've got that same 1,500 square foot house that cost about $80 per square foot to build, so $120 in improvement cost, but the overall price is $600,000. Well, you know that all your value there is in the land almost, right? And so that can fluctuate a lot more. Remember back to when we talked about the 3 types of markets, the cyclical market, the linear market, and the hybrid market. Well, that is another big connection to the Hartman Risk Evaluator because the linear markets are all the low land value markets, and the cyclical markets are the high land value markets. So now you have an understanding of that. And this applies anywhere on the planet. You know, it's not just in the United States. These rules work internationally, which is really nice. What's your badge action here? Enter the information for the properties you've selected into the template, take a screenshot of it, and upload that screenshot. Real easy. This is an easy one. And you know what? You get to the point where you go through the exercise of calculating it. It's good. But overall, you don't even need to calculate it. You know, you can do this stuff in your head. You just know the land and the improvement value based on the example I just gave you. All right. Thanks for joining me for the Hartman Risk Evaluator and packaged commodities investing, and I'll talk to you in the next lesson.